orchestrated entirely fresh revenge narrative with new characters, setting, and financial scenario. Orchestrated entirely fresh revenge narrative with new characters, setting, and financial scenario. My little brother texted me 5 words the night before the biggest day of our family's year. Mom thinks you should stay home. I was standing in my kitchen in Columbus when it came through, still holding my phone from wiring the last payment that afternoon. The final slice of the $118,000 I poured into rebuilding the diner. Our father died still talking about. The booths, the new line, the sign out front in the same loopy red cursive he'd loved. All of it. And that text wasn't even the part that broke something loose in me. It was what came after. My mother's voice on the phone, the way the contractor stopped returning my calls, and one line buried in a lease I'd skimmed 8 months earlier, that rearranged everything I thought I owed these people. And the morning I finally used it, not one of them saw it coming. My name is Greer Holloway, and for as long as I can remember, I was the one who handled things. I don't say that with pride. It wasn't a gift anyone celebrated. It was more like a job I got handed at 9 and never managed to quit. In our house in Marion, the unspoken rule was that I was fine. Greer's fine. Greer doesn't need much. My little brother was the one who needed. He was 3 years younger and he came out of the womb, my mother liked to say, with his heart on the outside of his body. Sensitive. That was the word. He cried at commercials. He got overwhelmed at birthday parties. He had to leave the room when the dog on TV got lost. And because he was sensitive, the whole house tilted toward him, the way a floor tilts toward a low corner. I was the one who walked myself to the bus stop in the dark in January. I was the one who learned to forge a decent version of my mother's signature on permission slips because asking her twice felt like pushing. I packed my own lunches starting in 4th grade. Peanut butter, the cheap kind, on bread that was a little stale. While she stood at the counter cutting the crusts off my brother's sandwich into the shape of a star, because otherwise he wouldn't eat. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand the math I grew up doing. His feelings counted double. Mine got rounded down to 0. My father was different, or I used to think he was. He ran the Copper Kettle, a diner on the corner of Center and Vine that had been his since he was 26. He worked open to close most days, and on Sundays, he let me sit at the counter and roll silverware into napkins while he taught me how to count a register and how to tell when a customer was a tipper and when they were going to stiff you and complain. Those Sunday mornings were the only place in my childhood where I felt like a whole person instead of a coping mechanism. He never cut my sandwich into a star. He just talked to me like I was a small adult he happened to respect. I loved him for it so much it hurt. But here's the thing about my father that took me 30 years to admit. He loved me, and he still let my mother run the house however she wanted, and the way she wanted it run was around my brother. When she made a decision, my father went quiet. Quiet was his whole vocabulary for conflict. So when she'd say, in front of company, "Oh, Greer's our easy one, we never have to worry about her," he wouldn't correct her. He'd just look at me a little longer than necessary, like an apology he couldn't afford to say out loud. He died 4 years ago. Heart attack on a Tuesday, prepping for the lunch rush, found by the dishwasher at 10:40 in the morning. The diner closed that week and never reopened. The bank took the building eventually. And for 3 years, my mother told anyone who would listen that the Copper Kettle was Dad's legacy, and someday, somehow, it was going to come back. You can probably guess who somehow turned out to be. She called me in February last year, not to ask how I was, not to ask about my job. I'm a project manager at a logistics company, which means I'm professionally responsible for things going correctly, a skill I learned for free as a child. She called, and within 90 seconds she was crying about Dad, and within 3 minutes she was telling me the building on Center and Vine was up for sale again, and within 5 she was saying the words I should have run from. "You're the only one in this family who could actually pull this off. Greer, your brother has the heart for it. You have the head." The heart and the head. She'd been splitting us into those two halves my entire life, and I still walked right into it. So I did the thing I always do. I made a spreadsheet. Then I made it real. I cashed out a chunk of my savings, the down payment on the condo I'd been planning for 2 years, gone in an afternoon. I took out a loan against my retirement. I signed a 5-year commercial lease on the building. I formed an LLC because my accountant told me to, and because the lease and the equipment financing and the vendor accounts all needed a legal entity behind them, and because I was the only one with the credit and the documentation to make any of it happen. My brother had a thin file and a habit of letting things go to collections. My mother had Social Security and a strong opinion, so it was me. The lease, the LLC, the loans, the liquor license application, the point-of-sale contract, the linen service, the produce account, the insurance, every single piece, my signature, my social, my name. I told myself it was a tribute. I told myself I was finally giving the family something instead of holding it together with my bare hands. My brother would run the front of house. He had the warmth, the charm, the way of remembering a regular's grandkids' names. My mother would consult on the menu, recreate Dad's recipes, be the soul of the place, and I would do what I always did. The boring, invisible, load-bearing work, and for once it would build something beautiful instead of just preventing a disaster. For about 4 months, it was the happiest I'd been since my father died. I'd drive the 2 hours from Columbus on weekends and stand in the gutted shell of the diner and watch it come back. The contractor, a steady guy named Hollis who'd known my dad, would walk me through the framing and the electrical and treat my questions like they mattered. My brother would show up around 11 with iced coffees and big plans for the playlist. My mother would sit in a folding chair and tell stories about Dad and tear up at the right moments. We were, for a little while, something close to a family that liked each other. And then, so slowly I told myself I was imagining it, the floor started tilting toward the low corner again. It started with his girlfriend. Mallory had been around for about a year. Bright, ambitious, very good at the kind of warmth that's really a strategy. She had ideas about the diner, branding ideas. She thought Copper Kettle was tired and we should evolve the concept. She thought Dad's recipes were a starting point. The first time she said the menu I'd built from my father's actual handwritten cards was a little stuck in the past, I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She just smiled and let it sit there. Then the contractor stopped looping me in. Hollis would send a question about the kitchen layout and somehow it went to my brother now, not to me, even though I was the one cutting the checks. The linen rep emailed my brother. The sign company called my brother to confirm the color, and they got it wrong, and when I caught it on a drive-by, my brother got defensive and said I was micromanaging his diner. His diner. I let it go. I was good at letting things go. I'd had 30-some years of practice. The clearest moment, the one I keep going back to, was a tasting. My mother had recreated Dad's chili, and we all sat in the half-finished dining room with paper bowls. And it was good. It was him. It tasted exactly like him. And I started to cry a little, the embarrassing kind, and Mallory put her hand on my brother's arm and said, gently, like she was doing me a kindness, "Maybe at the opening it's better if Greer stays behind the scenes. She's so intense. We want it to feel warm." And my mother nodded. My brother looked at his lap. And nobody, not one of them, said, "Greer paid for this." Greer's name is on all of it. Greer's the reason there's a chili to taste. I should have stood up right then. Instead, I wiped my face and said something about needing to check the insurance paperwork. And I went and sat in my car. And I told myself I was being too sensitive. Which is rich, isn't it? Since sensitivity was supposedly the one trait I didn't have. The grand opening was set for a Saturday in October. I'd handled the soft opening supplies, the extra staffing, the press release to the local paper, the ribbon, the whole thing. I'd booked a hotel in Marion for the Friday night so I could be there early. On Thursday, my brother texted, "Mom thinks you should stay home." I read it standing in my kitchen. I read it again. I waited for the dots, for a joke, for some context that would make it mean something other than what it said. Nothing came. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted back 3 words of my own. "What is this?" and watched the dots appear and vanish and appear and die. 20 minutes later, my mother called with the voice. "You know the one if you've had a mother like mine. Soft, careful, sorry not sorry. Greer, honey. Don't make this a thing. Mallory just feels like the energy on the day should be calm, and you know how you get. You're so in charge." The kids, my 31-year-old brother and his girlfriend, wanted to be their moment. You understand. You always understand. I asked her if she remembered who paid for the moment. There was a pause. Then she said, "Don't be like that. Money isn't everything, Greer. Your brother's putting his whole heart into this." His heart, my $118,000, the head and the heart, splitting us right down the middle one more time, and somehow in the math, the heart always came out worth more. I said okay. I actually said okay. And I hung up and I sat down at my kitchen table and I did not cry. I waited to feel the wave of it, the hurt, the humiliation, the rejection I'd been swallowing since I was 9. And instead, what rose up in me was quiet and cold and almost pleasant. It was the feeling of a problem becoming solvable. Because I'd opened my laptop, and I was looking at the folder where I kept all the documents, and I was reading them for the first time, not as a daughter or a sister doing a favor, but as the person whose name was on every single line. The lease, tenant, Greer Holloway, sole guarantor. The LOC, member, Greer Holloway, 100%. The equipment loan, $62,000 of ovens and walk-in cooler and a flat top my father would have wept over. Borrower, Greer Holloway, personally guaranteed. The bank account, everything ran through, sole signatory, Greer Holloway. The produce account, the linen contract, the POS, the insurance, the city food service permit, pending final inspection. Me. They hadn't just let me pay for it. They'd needed me to, because not one of them could have. And then they'd convinced themselves, and almost convinced me, that the part of the work that mattered was the part they did, and the part that could be safely erased was mine. I sat there until almost 1 in the morning, and the rain came in off the lake the way it does in October, and I felt my whole life rearrange itself into something I could finally hold. At 1:14 a.m., I opened a new email to Hollis, the contractor. I owned the project. The final inspection was scheduled for Friday morning, and he was meeting the city inspector there. "Hi, Hollis," I wrote. "As the owner and account holder, I'm canceling Friday's inspection and pausing all work, effective immediately. Please don't release keys or grant access to anyone. I'll be in touch about next steps." I read it twice. I sent it. Then I went down the list. I called the staffing agency's after-hours line and left a message rescinding the 12 temporary servers and bussers I'd booked for Saturday. I emailed the produce supplier and canceled the standing order and the giant opening weekend delivery. I emailed the linen company. I logged into the POS portal and suspended the account so no card would run through it. I called the bank's automated line and froze the operating account, then drafted an email to my banker for the morning. I emailed the local paper's events editor and pulled the press release. I canceled the ice delivery, the floral order for the front windows, the rented tables for the sidewalk, the permit for the sidewalk itself. The replies that came back that night and at dawn were the same. Every one of them understood. "We'll process per the agreement. Sorry to hear it, Greer. Thanks for the heads up." Nobody argued. Nobody could. I wasn't asking permission. I was the permission. I just never once in my life used it. Around 4 in the morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window and watched the sky go from black to the dirty silver that passes for sunrise in Ohio in the fall. My chest, which had been a clenched fist since I was a kid, was just open. I want to be honest with you, it didn't feel like revenge. Revenge sounds hot and loud. This was cool and very quiet. It felt like setting down something I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. They told me to stay home. Fine, I stayed home. I just took the diner home with me. The next morning, my phone did the thing phones do in movies, lit up and buzzed itself off the nightstand. By 8, 11 missed calls. By 9, the texts had started, and you could watch the temperature change in real time, like a fever spiking. First, confused. "Greer, the inspector says it's canceled. What's going on?" Then, from my mother, "Greer, please call your brother, is panicking." Then Mallory, who had my number for the first time ever. "Hi, Greer. I think there's been a misunderstanding with the vendors. Can you call the produce company and fix it? We open tomorrow." Fix it, as if I were the IT desk. Then, around 11, my brother, no longer playing it cool. "Why are the doors locked? Why won't Hollis let us in?" The city guy left. We have 60 people coming tomorrow. Greer, answer me. Then my mother again, dropping the soft voice entirely. This is insane. You are being completely unstable. After everything we did for you, you do this. You're going to humiliate your brother in front of the whole town. Unstable. There it was, the word people reach for when they don't want to look at what they did to earn your no. I'd sent a dozen polite, complete sentence emails to professionals at 1 a.m. and not raised my voice once, and I was the unstable one. I set the phone face down on the table and ate my eggs. I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain. I opened my laptop and I made one more folder and I labeled it plainly, and into it I put every contract, every payment confirmation, every wire receipt, every cancellation email, every line that proved exactly what I'd put in and exactly what I'd taken out. Not because I wanted to fight, because I'd learned finally that in my family, the truth was the only thing that couldn't be cut into the shape of a star. At 7:30 that evening, the buzzer for my building rang. Nobody rings my buzzer. I live alone, 2 hours from all of them, on purpose. I went to the intercom and it was my brother. I almost didn't let him up, but some old reflex, the 9-year-old who still wanted to be needed, pressed the button. He came in looking like he'd aged 10 years in a day. He's always been the handsome one, the charming one, the one rooms warm up for, and he looked gray and small and his eyes were red. He sat on the very edge of my couch like he wasn't sure he was allowed on the furniture. "Why are you doing this?" he said. "Not even a hello." "You told me to stay home," I said. "That's not, Mom said that. I just sent the text." He couldn't even own the 5 words he'd typed. "I didn't think you'd, God, Greer, you canceled everything. There's no inspection now. There's no food. The servers aren't coming. The bank account's frozen. We can't open." "No," I said, "you can't. People are coming tomorrow. The whole town, basically. The paper was supposed to." He stopped. "Mallory's family is driving in from Cleveland." "Mallory," I said, "told me I should stay behind the scenes so the day would feel warm, so I'm behind the scenes. You can't even see me. That was the point, wasn't it?" He had the decency to look at the floor. "She didn't mean it like." "She meant it exactly like that. So did Mom. So did you, or you wouldn't have hit send." I kept my voice level and I watched it unsettle him more than yelling ever could have. "Did any of you, even once, stop and think about whose name is on that lease? Whose retirement account is in that flat top? Whose credit is on the line for $62,000 of equipment in a building none of you can legally enter without me?" "It's Dad's diner," he said, and his voice cracked on it, and for a second I almost felt it. The old pull. "It's his legacy. You can't just." "It's his legacy," I agreed, "and I rebuilt it because I loved him, not because I love being your wallet. There's a difference, and you've never once had to learn it, so let me teach you now." I leaned forward. "I didn't take anything from you. I took back what was always mine, the second you decided I was good enough to pay for the party but not good enough to come to it." He started to cry then, really cry, the way he did at 9 when the dog on TV got lost. And the cruelest thing was how little it moved me. I'd spent my whole life rearranging my insides around his feelings. I was just out of room. "Please," he said, "just unfreeze it. Just call Hollis. We can still do it, maybe a week late. Mom said you'd come around. She said you always come around." "Mom's been wrong about me for 31 years, I said. "She just never noticed because I kept proving her right." The buzzer went again. 2 long, angry presses. I didn't even have to look. I let her up too, because I wanted them in the same room when I said it. My mother came through the door like weather. "Greer Ann Holloway, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" And behind her, of course, Mallory, composed, jaw set, doing the math on how to manage me. "I'm doing exactly what the documents let me do," I said. "You are tearing this family apart over an inspection," my mother said. "Over a guest list. Do you hear yourself?" A guest list. I almost laughed. "Mom, you and Mallory wrote me off a building I own. You didn't take me off a guest list. You took me out of my own father's last dream because I make you uncomfortable when I'm not being useful in silence." Mallory stepped in then, smooth as ever. Greer, I think we all just need to take a breath. We were trying to create a calm environment. You can be a lot. That's not an insult, it's just. This is me, I said, being a lot. I spread my hands. I was sitting completely still. This is me at my most. I sent emails. I drank coffee. Meanwhile, you three spent today telling the entire town I had a breakdown. So let's be precise about who's calm. Mallory looked away. My mother didn't have the grace to. Fix it, my mother said, and it wasn't a request. It was the command she'd been issuing my whole life and expecting obedience. Fix it, Greer. No. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. My brother stopped crying out of pure shock. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Why? She finally said, and it came out almost like a child's voice, genuinely baffled. Why are you being like this? And there it was, the line I hadn't rehearsed, that just arrived whole and certain. I'm not being anything to you. For the first time in my life, I'm being something to me. I stood up. You erased me from his dream. So I took his dream back. It was never yours to give away, and it was never mine to keep handing over. I watched it land on each of them. My brother covered his mouth. Mallory went very still. My mother reached for my arm the way she did when she wanted to reset me, smooth me back into the easy one, and I stepped out of reach. No more calls, I said. No more, you're the strong one. No more using the best parts of me as an excuse to ignore the rest. The copper kettle is closed. It stays closed unless and until I decide otherwise, and that decision is mine, all the way down. Now, please leave. All of you. They stood there a moment longer, waiting for me to crumble, because crumbling was my native language, and they'd never heard me speak anything else. It didn't come. Eventually, they filed out. My brother last, looking back at me from the hall like he was seeing a stranger, which, in a way, he was. When the door clicked, I leaned against it and breathed out, and it wasn't triumph, it was just air. Finally, all the way down to the bottom of my lungs, air. The opening didn't happen. 60 people got a group text about an unexpected delay. The local paper ran nothing. My mother called every day for a week, and I let it ring. And the voicemails got shorter and stranger, less furious and more lost, like she genuinely could not understand how the daughter who always came around had stopped coming around. I did eventually deal with the diner, because I'm still me and I can't leave a loose end to rot. I talked to my accountant, a sharp, kind woman named Miss Bellamy, who'd been telling me for months that the deal was lopsided and I hadn't wanted to hear it. We worked out the cleanest exit. I kept the building. I owned the lease, and I'd been paying it, so why not? And I leased the space to an actual restaurateur, a woman who'd run 2 good places in Columbus and wanted a project in a small town. She kept the name. She kept 3 of Dad's recipes on the menu out of respect when I told her the story, including the chili, and she put a little line at the bottom of the menu, in memory of the original kettle. I didn't ask her to. I cried in the parking lot when I saw it, the good kind this time. My brother and my mother weren't part of any of it. They didn't have to be. It was never legally theirs, and after that night, it wasn't emotionally mine to share anymore either. I went back to therapy. I'd quit 2 years before because I kept spending the sessions talking about everyone but myself, and that's a thing my therapist, Dr. Ramsey, gently pointed out to me. This time I talked about me, about being 9 and packing my own lunch, about how I'd learned that love in my family was a transaction where I always paid and they always collected, and how I'd somehow convinced myself that was the same thing as being needed. It was slow and it was unglamorous, and some weeks I just sat there and didn't say much, and that turned out to be allowed too. I joined a thing, a small group of women who'd started businesses that met on Tuesday nights above a bookstore. They argued with each other and asked direct questions and didn't punish anybody for having a spine. The first time I said no to one of them about a favor, fully expecting the floor to tilt, nothing happened. She just said, no problem, and moved on. I drove home that night sort of stunned. It can really be that simple. For people who didn't grow up the way I did, you just say the word and the world keeps spinning. My brother sent a letter, months later, not a text. A letter, handwritten, which I think was Mallory's idea, or maybe his own attempt at something that cost him more than thumbs. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for the diner. He just wrote that he'd spent his whole life letting other people decide I didn't have feelings, because it was easier than admitting how much I'd been carrying for all of us. He said he was sorry. He said he understood if it took a long time or forever. I haven't written back yet. I might. Some things need air and distance before you can tell whether they can be rebuilt or whether you're just trying to put your name back on something that nearly cost you yourself. But the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I wish someone had told the 9-year-old in the dark at the bus stop, is this. A boundary isn't a punishment you hand to someone else. It's a door you close so that the peace you fought for has somewhere safe to stay. If you've ever been the strong one until there was nothing left of you to be strong with, I'd like to hear about it. And if any part of this landed somewhere true, stay with me. There's another story coming. For 31 years, I believed that being needed was the same as being loved, and that diner on Center and Vine is where I finally learned the difference. None of what happened to me was random. My family didn't suddenly decide to erase me the week of the opening. They'd been quietly training me for it since I was 9, packing my own lunch while they cut my brother's sandwich into a star. Every time I swallowed a Slate, every time I said okay when I meant no, I was teaching them that my limits weren't real. So when Mallory said I should stay behind the scenes and my mother nodded and my brother hit send on those 5 words, they weren't being cruel out of nowhere. They were collecting on a debt I'd been letting them run up my whole life. Causes have effects. I had spent decades planting the idea that I would always absorb the blow, and the grand opening was just the harvest. What changed everything wasn't anger. Anger I'd had for years and it never moved a thing. What moved things was the moment I stopped asking whether I had the right to say no and simply read the page in front of me. The lease, the loans, the bank account, my name on every line. I think this is the part people miss when they hear a story like mine and call it revenge. It wasn't temper. It was finally seeing clearly, looking at the truth without flinching and letting it tell me what to do. The clarity was already there in the documents. I'd just been too busy being useful to read them. But seeing the truth and acting on it are two different things, and the second one cost me more than the first. Saying no to my mother's voice, the one that had reset me my whole life, took everything I had. I had to sit in that quiet kitchen at 1 a.m. and choose over and over not to crumble, because crumbling was the only language I knew. That kind of steadiness isn't loud. Nobody claps for it. It's just refusing to abandon yourself one more time. If there's anything I'd hand to you across the table, it's this. Do right by people, but never confuse being good with being endlessly available, because the people who benefit from that confusion will never correct it for you. Look honestly at what's actually in front of you, even when the truth is inconvenient and the math is ugly, because clarity is the only thing that can't be cut into the shape of someone else's comfort. And when you finally know what you have to do, find the spine to do it quietly and completely, even with your hands shaking. Mallory thought I was a lot. My mother thought I was unstable. Hollis just thought I was the owner because I was. A boundary isn't a wall you build to punish them. It's a door you close so the peace you fought so hard for finally has somewhere to live.